Horton.
What if the greatest country song you've never heard was once #1? Not a deep cut, not a forgotten demo, but a chart-topping, dance-hall-shaking, radio-dominating hit that the whole world somehow let go.
Are you painted up your lips and rolling?
Between 1960 and 1975, country music produced artists who climbed to the very top, stood in the spotlight for one blazing moment, and then quietly disappeared, leaving behind a single song that deserved to live forever.
I wanna tell you all a story about a Harper Valley widow.
This is Vinyl at Dusk, where the vinyl never stops spinning and the stories behind the music never get left in the dust. And tonight we are counting down 10 forgotten country one-hit wonders, whose songs changed everything, whose stories will break your heart, and whose voices the radio abandoned far too soon. Number 10, Bobbie Goldsboro, Honey, United Artists Records, 1968.
See the tree, how big it's grown, but friend,
In the spring of 1968, a song about a widow named Honey stopped America completely in its tracks. Bobbie Goldsboro had been a working Nashville musician for years, a former member of Roy Orbison's touring band, a session player with quiet, steady credits to his name. But no one had ever heard him sound like this. Honey was written by Bobby Russell, a Nashville songwriter who was having one of the greatest creative years in country music history. The same year he penned Little Green Apples for Roger Miller. Russell played an unadorned demo of the song for Goldsboro, and Goldsboro's first instinct was to pass. He didn't hear the magic in it yet.
say she saw through me and hugged my neck.
But something in that simple, grief-soaked lyric pulled him back. The trouble was, Russell had already promised the song to Bob Shane of the Kingston Trio, and he held Goldsboro to a strict agreement. They could not release their version until Shane's run on the charts was finished.
And I loved her so.
The moment Shane's version faded, Goldsboro's was rush-released on United Artists, and within its first 3 weeks, it had already sold 1 million copies. Honey spent 5 consecutive weeks at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, longer than any other single released that entire year, and crossed both the country and pop charts in a feat achieved by only 4 records throughout the entire decade of the 1960s.
Laughed at her and she got mad the first day that she planted.
It became the biggest selling record worldwide for all of 1968, across every genre of music on the planet. Bobbie Goldsboro never returned to that height again, but for one extraordinary spring, the whole world sat still and listened to a man grieve a woman named Honey, and that grief felt like it belonged to every one of them. Number 9, Jeannie C. Riley, Harper Valley PTA, 1968.
I wanna tell you all a story about a Harper Valley.
There is a school in Bellevue, Tennessee called Harpeth Valley Elementary, and one afternoon, a songwriter named Tom T. Paul drove past it, read the sign, and wrote one of the most dangerous songs in country music history. Paul had been reading Sinclair Lewis, Elmer Gantry, Babbitt, novels about small-town hypocrisy dressed up in Sunday clothes, and the name on that school sign gave his fury a home. Harper Valley PTA told the story of a widowed mother named Mrs. Johnson, called out by her local parent-teacher association for her short skirts and her way of living on her own terms. And then she walked into that meeting and read every one of them back their own sins. Jeannie C. Riley was working as a secretary in Nashville when she heard the song, and she recorded it with a fire that no one saw coming. Released in August 1968 on Shelby Singleton's independent Plantation Records, the single exploded. It reached #1 on both the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart and the Billboard Hot 100 Pop chart simultaneously. In doing so, Jeannie C. Riley became the first woman in history to reach #1 on both charts with the same song, a feat that would not be repeated until Dolly Parton's 9 to 5 arrived 13 years later in 1981.
Couldn't be here 'cause he stayed too long at Kelly's bar again.
The song sold over 6 million copies worldwide, reached the top 5 in the United Kingdom, and won the Grammy Award for Best Country Vocal Performance, Female, that same year. And yet today, most people under 40 have never once heard the name Jeannie C. Riley. She made history on a Tuesday in 1968, and the world forgot her name by Thursday. But that song, that fury, that widow in the miniskirt standing in front of the PTA, that will never stop being one of the bravest moments in country music. Number 8, * Lynn Anderson. I Never Promised You a Rose Garden. 1970.
I beg your pardon.
There is a song that was written for a man rejected by a producer, nearly never recorded, and it became the biggest selling country album by a female artist for 27 straight years. Rose Garden was written by Joe South, the same man who played guitar on Bob Dylan's Blonde on Blonde and wrote Hush for Deep Purple. And when Lynn Anderson brought it to her husband and producer Glenn Sutton, he told her no.
Diamond rings, you don't find roses growing.
It was a man's song, he said. The pronouns were wrong. The whole thing didn't fit her voice, and he didn't want to waste studio time on it. Lynn Anderson recorded it anyway. She had first heard Joe South perform it himself, felt something deep and undeniable in the song's message. The idea that love never promised you perfect, only something real, and she was not willing to walk away from that.
I want you to know you better repeat.
On December 26, 1970, the recording hit #1 on the country chart, where it stayed for 5 consecutive weeks, while simultaneously climbing to #3 on the Billboard Hot 100. It reached #1 in Australia, Austria, Belgium, Canada, Finland, Germany, Ireland, Norway, New Zealand, and Switzerland, making Lynn Anderson a global name overnight.
Shine. There's gotta be a little rain.
The Rose Garden album held #1 on the country albums chart for 14 weeks and earned her the Grammy for Best Female Country Vocal Performance in 1971. It would remain the best-selling country album by a female artist until Shania Twain's The Woman in Me finally broke the record in 1995. One man said no, and one woman said yes. And what came out of that argument became the international anthem of an entire generation looking for something honest to hold on to. Number 7 * Sammy Smith, Help Me Make It Through the Night. Mega Records, 1971.
It's laying soft.
And the title of this song did not come from a broken heart or a sleepless night. It came from a Frank Sinatra interview in Esquire magazine. A reporter asked the chairman of the board what he believed in, and Sinatra answered without blinking, booze, broads, or a Bible. Whatever helps me make it through the night.
Help me make it through.
Chris Christopherson was still a struggling Nashville songwriter when those words found him, and they became the first line of everything. He wrote, "Help me make it through the night," while staying at the home of country artist Dottie West and her husband Bill, and he offered the song to West first, but she passed, calling the lyrics too risque for her to record.
And I won't try to understand.
Nobody wanted to touch it. The song was raw, vulnerable, and unapologetically honest about human loneliness in a way that Nashville wasn't quite ready to accept. Sammy Smith, a California-born singer who had dropped out of school at age 11 to sing professionally in nightclubs, heard it and said yes without hesitation. Her version was released in 1970 and reached #1 on the country chart in February 1971, while simultaneously climbing to #8 on the Billboard Hot 100, one of the most stunning crossover moments in the history of country music. At the exact moment Sammy Smith's recording was sitting at #8 on the pop chart, Janis Joplin's version of Christopherson's Me and Bobbie McGee was sitting at #1, 2 versions of Christopherson's Heart on the same chart at the same time. The song won the Grammy for Best Country Song, and Smith won Best Country Vocal Performance, Female, and then Sammy Smith, one of the finest voices country music ever produced, faded from the mainstream as quietly as she had arrived. She left behind a record that Rolling Stone ranked among the 200 greatest country songs of all time in 2024, and a vocal performance that Christopherson himself once said was the most honest reading his words ever received. Number 6 * C.W. McCall, Convoy, 1975.
The June in a Kenworth pulling logs, cab over Pete.
McCall was not a real person, and that is the most extraordinary part of this story. The name was invented by a man named Bill Fries, an advertising executive from Omaha, Nebraska, who created the CW McCall character to sell bread on television commercials. The ads won a national advertising award. The character connected with audiences, and Fries signed a recording contract with MGM Records. Still pretending to be a fictional truck driver named CW McCall.
About 5 miles or so, 10 Roger, them hogs is getting in 10.
In June of 1975, Fries was listening to his CB radio when the idea struck him. An entire song built around the coded language that truckers used to talk to each other on the open highway. He and his collaborator Chip Davis, the same man who would later create the New Age phenomenon Mannheim Steamroller, bought a CB radio, drove the highways of Nebraska, and wrote down every piece of trucker slang they could find.
In the Tulsa town, we had 85 trucks in all, but they's a road.
Bears were police, swindle sheets were logbooks, and chicken coops were way stations. And out of that glossary came Convoy, the story of a nation of truckers rising up against government speed limits and fuel restrictions at the height of America's oil crisis. The song debuted on the Billboard Hot Country Singles Chart on November 29, 1975, soared to #1 in just its 4th week, and stayed there for 6 straight weeks.
Size. Yeah, them chicken coops was full of bear. Yeah, we got a great big convoy. Ain't you?
It simultaneously reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 pop chart, making it one of only 7 singles in the entire decade of the 1970s to simultaneously top both the country and pop charts. Rolling Stone placed it at number 98 on their list of the 100 greatest country songs of all time.
I says, calling all trucks, this here is the Duck. We about to go a-hunting bear.
It sold over 2 million copies, inspired a major Hollywood film in 1978, and made CW McCall, a man who did not exist, one of the most recognizable names in American music. After the music ended, Bill Fries moved to the small town of Ouray, Colorado. And the residents liked him so much, they elected him mayor. If you're still here, still feeling every one of these stories, do us a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to VinylAtDusk, turn on notifications, and share this with someone who still loves the music the radio left behind. Because we've got more stories coming, and the best ones haven't even started yet. Number 5, * Bobbie Gentry, Ode to Billie Joe, 1967.
Was the 3rd of June.
In July of 1967, Capitol Records almost released this song as a B-side. Industry wisdom said the recording was too dark, too long, too strange, and too different to ever get played on the radio. And nearly every person who heard the demo agreed. They were all wrong.
I saw him at the sawmill yesterday on Chuck.
Bobbie Gentry had been hustling in the music business for nearly a decade when she wrote Ode to Billie Joe, a gothic, slow-burning Mississippi Delta narrative about a young man named Billie Joe McAllister, who jumped off the Tallahatchie Bridge, and the family dinner table conversation that followed his death as though nothing had happened. She recorded a rough demo with just her guitar and her voice. It landed on the desk of Capitol producer Kelly Gordon, and Gordon hired a string arranger named Jimmy Haskell to add an arrangement quickly, with leftover studio time. The result was one of the most haunting recordings in American music history.
Back at the Carroll County Picture Show.
With no special promotion, no tour, and no industry support, Ode to Billie Joe climbed the Billboard charts past the Doors, past Aretha Franklin, and past the Beatles, knocking All You Need Is Love out of the #1 position. It sat at #1 for 4 weeks and spent the entire summer of 1967 as the inescapable sound of a generation asking one question the song deliberately refused to answer. What was thrown off the Tallahatchie Bridge?
Talking to him after church last Sunday night.
When a reporter asked Gentry directly, she said the question itself was the point. She had wanted to capture the indifference of ordinary people in the face of tragedy, the way a family could hear news of a death and respond with Pass the Black Eyed Peas. The song won 3 Grammy Awards in 1968, including Best Female Pop Vocal Performance and Best New Artist.
A piece of apple pie. You know it don't.
Bobbie Gentry gave a handful of interviews, recorded a classic duet album with Glenn Campbell, became one of the most celebrated performers in Las Vegas. And then, somewhere in the early 1980s, disappeared completely from public life, never to be seen or heard from again. The voice went silent, but the bridge never did. Number 4 * Freddie Fender, Before the Next Teardrop Falls. ABC Records, 1975.
It's your happiness that
Freddie Fender was born Valdemar Garza Huerta in 1937 in San Benito, Texas, the son of a migrant farm laborer, and he adopted the name Freddie Fender because, as he said himself, he thought it would sell better with white audiences. He had been performing since the late 1950s, a Tex-Mex rockabilly singer with genuine talent and genuinely terrible luck. And in 1960, as he was preparing to release a record he had written called Wasted Days and Wasted Nights, he and his bass player were arrested in Louisiana for marijuana possession. Both men were sentenced to 5 years in Angola State Prison.
I'll be there.
Fender served 3 years before being released, and he spent most of the next decade working as a mechanic back in San Benito, the music career he had nearly built completely gone. In 1974, a shady Louisiana record man named Huey Moe, known in the industry as the Crazy Cajun, heard Fender singing and convinced him to cut a countrified single called Before the Next Teardrop Falls, a song that had already been recorded over 24 times since 1967 without a single artist making it a hit.
Before the next teardrop falls.
Fender was reluctant. He wanted to do rock and roll, not country, but he agreed. And then he did something no one before him had done with the song. He sang part of it in Spanish. That bilingual bridge changed everything. Before the Next Teardrop Falls reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart on March 14, 1975, and then climbed all the way to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 Pop chart. One of only 7 singles to top both charts simultaneously during the entire decade.
Si te quiere de verdad.
In 2025, the recording was inducted into the National Recording Registry of the Library of Congress, recognized as a culturally historic piece of American music. Freddie Fender spent 3 years in Angola prison for a crime that many states would not even consider a crime today, and came out the other side with a voice that turned a song 24 other artists had failed to make a hit into one of the most important recordings of the 1970s. That is the definition of grace under pressure. Number 3 * Johnny Darrell, Ruby, Don't Take Your Love to Town. United Artists Records.
Are you painted up your lips and rolling?
Before Kenny Rogers ever touched this song, a country singer from Hopewell, Alabama named Johnny Darrell brought it to the edge of a chart, stopped just short of the top, and handed one of the most devastating stories in country music history to the world. Ruby, Don't Take Your Love to Town was written by Mel Tillis, a songwriter who overcame a severe stutter to become one of Nashville's most respected voices, and it told the story of a war veteran, paralyzed and confined to his bed, listening helplessly as his wife painted her lips and walked out the door in search of someone who could give her what he no longer could.
Ah, Ruby, are you contemplating?
Tillis said he wrote the song about a World War II
But it
veteran,
won't be
but
long,
the lyrics
my
reference to a
friend,
crazy
that
Asian
I
war
used to be.
gave it a Vietnam-era heartbeat that an entire generation of Americans could not ignore. Johnny Darrell recorded it in 1967 and took it to number 9 on the country chart.
Don't take
His
and the
highest
wants and the
charting
needs
single,
of a woman your
a performance
age,
that
Ruby,
quietly
curled your
introduced
tinted
one of
hair.
country music's most wrenching melodies to the world.
And if I couldn't move, I'd get my gun and put her in.
Darrell had arrived in Nashville after a stint in the Army and a stint managing a Holiday Inn, connected to the music industry through Bobbie Bear, and signed with United Artists. And for a brief window in the late 1960s, he was the man first to record songs that would later become the defining hits of other artists' careers. He was first with Green Green Grass of Home before Porter Wagoner made it a hit, first with Ruby before Kenny Rogers made it a crossover sensation, and first with Pen in Hand before Vicky Carr turned it into a pop classic.
Lord, it's hard to love a man whose legs are bent and paralyzed.
Johnny Darrell was the man who found the songs that built other people's legends, and history forgot him while honoring everyone who came after him. He died in 1997 at the age of 57, his name largely absent from the conversations that credited the songs he first believed in. Number 2 * Porter Wagoner, Green Green Grass of Home. 1960 records.
I walked with my sweet Mary.
A Nashville songwriter named Curly Putman said the idea came to him from a crime scene he had seen in a film called The Asphalt Jungle, a condemned man's last image of the world he was leaving behind. And out of that image came one of the most beautiful and devastating songs country music has ever known. Green Green Grass of Home tells the story of a man coming home, the old house, the old oak tree, his mother waiting at the gate with open arms, a girl with auburn hair running toward him in the golden afternoon light.
And dry, and there's that old oak tree.
It sounds like a celebration. It sounds like everything a man could ever want. And then the final verse arrives, and the world it built dissolves, because the man was never going home freely. He was on death row, and every image of warmth and belonging was flooding through his mind in the last hours before his execution.
Of home.
Curly Putman wrote it in 1964, and it was first recorded by a country singer named Johnny Darrell. But it was Porter Wagoner, the man from West Plains, Missouri, who had built himself into a Nashville institution through rhinestone suits and a long-running syndicated television show, who first took it to the charts in 1965, reaching number 4 on the country chart. Tom Jones heard Jerry Lee Lewis's version of the song in a New York hotel room in 1965 and was so moved that he recorded his own version, and in December of 1966, Tom Jones's Green Green Grass of Home became the Christmas #1 in the United Kingdom, where it stayed for 7 consecutive weeks.
Hair of gold and lips like cherries.
Elvis Presley recorded it, Johnny Cash recorded it, Joan Baez recorded it, and the farm in Tennessee where Curly Putman raised cattle later became the very farm that Paul McCartney and Wings would sing about in Junior's Farm in 1974. The songwriter who wrote A Condemned Man's Dying Dream owned the land that gave the Beatles a song. And Porter Wagoner, the man who first made it a hit, still does not get the credit he deserves for bringing one of country music's greatest emotional blindsides into the world. Number 1. Final * Jessie Coulter, I'm Not Lisa. Capitol Records, 1975.
I'm not Lisa.
There is a song that begins with a woman explaining who she is not, and in that simple act of correcting a grieving man's broken memory, became one of the most quietly devastating #1s in country music history. Jessie Coulter was born Miriam Johnson in Phoenix, Arizona, the daughter of a Pentecostal preacher, and she began playing piano in church before she was old enough to understand the weight of a lyric. She married guitar legend Dwayne Eddy at 17, toured the world with him, released records that went nowhere, and quietly kept writing songs in the background of an industry that was not yet ready to hear her voice. By the time she married outlaw country pioneer Waylon Jennings in 1969, she had been living in the margins of Nashville for nearly a decade, close enough to feel the warmth of the spotlight, far enough away to still be invisible. I'm Not Lisa was a song she had written years earlier, drawn from a deeply personal place about a man whose grief over a woman named Lisa made him unable to truly see the woman standing in front of him. The lyric was tender, heartbreaking, and completely unafraid of silence. And when Capitol Records finally released it in 1975, the song moved through the country radio landscape like something that had been waiting a long time to be heard.
Years ago,
I'm Not Lisa reached number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 pop chart, Jessie Coulter's only song ever to crack the top 40, and reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart, the defining peak of her recording career as a solo artist. She became one of the faces of outlaw country alongside Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson, her name forever associated with a movement that changed the sound of Nashville. But it was this one quiet, personal, achingly honest song that carried her to the very top of the charts. The music industry moved on, as it always does, and Jessie Coulter never returned to those heights as a solo recording artist. But on the day I'm Not Lisa reached number 1, A preacher's daughter from Phoenix, who had spent a decade waiting in the wings, stepped into the light. And every word she sang was the truth. That is the most country music story ever told. These were 10 songs that once ruled the airwaves of this country. Songs that climbed to the very top of the charts and then slowly, quietly faded from the radio without warning. Not because they stopped being great, and not because the voices that sang them stopped deserving to be heard, but simply because the world kept spinning and nobody reached back to stop it. If this countdown brought back a memory you hadn't touched in years, or introduced you to a voice you never knew existed, leave it in the comments below. Those stories belong in this community. And if you haven't subscribed to Vinyl at Dusk yet, now is the time. Because every single week, we go deeper into the music that made country what it is, and the stories that the radio left behind. The vinyl never stops spinning here. We'll see you down the road.